Last one this season. Well, regular season anyway.
There we go, that's better. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and it is the final week of the CFL regular season. We have finally made it. We've all made it to the end, and there's a couple of interesting games here in the final week. We still have to determine a couple of playoff seeds in the West Division. We don't even know who's going to be hosting the West Final yet. Now, if you'll recall from last week's episode, I talked about what I needed to do in the final 2 weeks of the season and right up through the Grey Cup game in order to have my picks be at 60% by the end of the season and by the end of the regular season. Well, I basically did my job in week 20 and got one of the two results that I was looking for. I did manage to go 8-4 across all of my picks in the CFL in week 20. That included going 3-1 straight up as well as 3-1 against the spread. 54-23 straight up is the 70% clip that we've been looking for. 47-29-1 against the spread is the 61% clip, the 60% clip that we have been looking for. We're still 5 games underwater on the totals, so hard to say whether we'll get back to 500 on that, but if we do, that's even icing on the cake. 8-4 last week means I'm 137-93-1 on the season, which is 59.31%. 60% by the end of the regular season is still achievable. I have to go 9-3 this week. Got to go 9-3. That'll get me to 60% by the end of the regular season. If we do not do that, it's still more than achievable to get to 60% by the end of the Grey Cup, by the end of the playoffs. I only need to go 18-9. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad. If I go 18-9 down the stretch, I'm at 60% and I'm happy. Now, we talked about the fact that we still don't even know who is going to be hosting the West Final, and that is true. Here are the remaining playoff scenarios, and they all exist in the West Division. Obviously, in the East, we know Edmonton is going to have the crossover and travel to Montreal to play the Alouettes. Nothing there can change. So in the West Division, Saskatchewan holds their own destiny in their hands. If Saskatchewan wins or ties this week, they're in, they host the West Final, and there's nothing that any of the other teams are capable of doing about it. Saskatchewan also hosts the West Final in the event that Calgary loses this week. The only scenario under which the Calgary Stampeders can leapfrog Saskatchewan and host the West Final is if Calgary wins and Saskatchewan loses. That is the only scenario under which we could see Calgary jump up and host the West Final. Now, Calgary is guaranteed a home playoff game if they win or tie this week. If Calgary loses this week, not only do they not get the bye to the West Final, but if they lose this week, Winnipeg actually hosts the West semifinal, which would happen next week. Calgary would be leapfrogged, by Winnipeg in the standings, and the Blue Bombers all of a sudden, even though they're on bye this week, would have a home playoff game next week. That would be a heck of a situation and a heck of a gift, a great gift that Calgary could give the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. As we've done over the last couple of weeks, we're going to shove the CFL fantasy stuff to the end of the video. It was a bad second half of the season for fantasy, really after the first 4 or 5 weeks, kind of fell off the rails. I look forward to taking another crack at this next season. Hopefully I can take the lessons learned this year and apply them to next year, but we'll move that to the end of the video. Our week 21 schedule looks like this. Again, we got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the bye. Montreal is in Ottawa taking on the REDBLACKS. Edmonton is in Saskatchewan taking on the Riders. Toronto is in Hamilton taking on the Ticats. And Calgary is in BC taking on the Lions. Now, of course, given that this is the last week of the regular season, there's a bunch of teams in here that have absolutely nothing to play for. And yet we've got some really big numbers on the spreads. So here's the way we're going to do this week. And it's going to be a little different. It's going to be a little weird, maybe a little awkward, but take this journey with me. Rather than really sitting down and crunching the hard numbers and everything, like we're trying to anticipate, okay, if a team has nothing to play for, but they're going to the playoffs, good chance they're probably going to be resting some starters. And a bunch of starters have already been announced that they're not going to be playing this week. So what we're going to do with the games this week is I'm going to talk about what happened with the specific team the previous week very briefly, but I'm just going to talk about what do I want to see. What do I want to see in week 21 from this particular team before we get into the picks? So as an example, we're going to start in Ottawa, that Montreal and Ottawa matchup. Montreal losing a 38-26 decision against the Hamilton Ticats. That was in Montreal last week. Now, Montreal may have actually been able to win that game, or at least kept competitive in a shootout, because they lost the game ultimately by 12 points, but that could have stayed within a possession and really been, right down to the wire had Montreal decided to keep Vernon Adams in the game. They did not decide to do that. They pulled Vernon Adams for the second half. So here's what I want to see from the Alouettes this week. We've already established they don't have anything to play for. They can't improve their position. They can't lose position in the playoff race. I don't want to see any significant starters playing in this game. So I'm talking about, I don't want to see Vernon Adams. I don't want to see William Stanback. I don't even necessarily want to see like Eugene Lewis. I don't want to see their skill players really on either side of the ball getting the start here. But what I want to see is I want to see this Alouettes team display that they have quality depth against a weak opponent, and it is a weak opponent in the Ottawa REDBLACKS. They've lost double-digit games in a row. So that's basically it. That's what we're going to establish when we talk about each one of these teams before we get into the picks. On Ottawa's side, like I said, they've lost 10 games in a row, and in their last 4, they've been being outscored by double digits. They're being outscored 30-15 on average in their last 4 games. This is a bad football team, has been a bad football team basically all season, coming off of a 30-point loss in Toronto last week. Lest anyone question why Ottawa is the CFL's worst team, you lose by 30 points to the Argos. Here's what I want to see from the REDBLACKS. Just win, Double D. It was usually just win, baby. But Dominique Davis is getting the start at quarterback this week. Doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. Just win. Just win one more game. The fans of this team do deserve to see this team go out this season on a victory. There's so many things that need to change with this REDBLACKS team, but just for the last week of the season, give the fans something to cheer about. Edmonton and Saskatchewan. So the Eskimos are coming into this game off of the 3-point loss last week at home against Saskatchewan. They had that game for quite a bit, and it was the second half defense that really let the Eskimos down. And I think that has to be a concern heading into the playoffs, especially when, you were staked to a 10-point lead against another playoff-bound opponent so late in the season, and your defense simply was not able to hang on to the lead that you were staked to in the second half. What I want to see from the Eskimos, it looks like Trevor Harris is not going to play, so this is another Logan Kilgore game. It's not going to be a great game. If you're going to go to the length of, hey, Trevor Harris is not going to play, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but if Trevor Harris isn't going to play, I don't really want to see any of these veteran starters out there. As if they're a starter of significance, I don't want to see virtually any of those players. If I'm an Eskimos fan, and if I'm watching this wanting to see the Eskimos in particular, I don't really want to see their starters. I don't want to see any of their veteran wide receivers. I don't want to see CJ Gable, who has been trying to stay healthy, has been, struggling to stay on the field. It's an inconsequential game against an opponent that you wouldn't even have to worry about facing unless you made it all the way to the Grey Cup. And it's going to be tough for you to make it to the Grey Cup if half of your starting offense is injured. So I don't want to see significant starters. The Riders are winners of 2 straight games coming off that 27-24 win at Edmonton last week. So this is a rematch from last week. And the Riders kept it calm in that game in the face of what was, again, a halftime deficit. And I just love the fact that you had a game like that for Cody Fajardo, especially in the second half, pair of touchdown passes in the third quarter, and he led them to that comeback. That is a guy rewarding the faith that his team's management showed in him when they traded away Zach Collaros after the injury in the first week of the season. Here's what I want to see from the Riders. The Riders still have something to play for in this game. I'm laying down the gauntlet for discipline for this football team. What I want to see from Saskatchewan, 6 penalties or fewer. That's where your over-under is. Even that game last week that they ultimately did come back and win, they had 10 penalties in that game. Imagine what you could have done in that game if you only had 6 or 5 or 4. If you cut those penalty numbers in half, imagine how good this team could be if it stopped shooting itself in the foot. Top to bottom on your football team, show me a team that wins the West Division that looks like they deserved to win the West Division. And before we go to the next two games on the week and then eventually get into our actual picks coming up for this week, I'm going to take this moment, as I always do, to pump the tires of my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. NerdTees.ca, promo code BWFinest, although right now, on nerdtees.ca for this weekend, don't worry about that promo code, because site-wide is a 20% off sale all weekend long. It's automatically applied. You don't have to worry about putting in any promo code. 20% off. It's better than my normal average everyday code. There's a great sale on right now. There is no excuse. There's never been a better time for you to go on nerdtees.ca and grab one of their incredible blends of tea, like Ontario Peaches that I'm enjoying this evening. Nerdtees.ca, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love just in time for Christmas. You can do it on Nerdtees, baby. Toronto versus Hamilton in Hamilton. Argos winning last week, that 30-point victory again at home against Ottawa. I forgot for a second whether that was in Ottawa or not. Touchdown passes from three different quarterbacks. They got it from MBT, they got it from Dakota Prukop, and then they got it from their rookie Canadian, I think O'Connor? Am I wrong in saying that? But look, touchdown passes from three different quarterbacks, and not to continue railing on the Red Blacks, but that is like peak 2019 Ottawa REDBLACKS, right? Not only did you allow multiple touchdown passes to the starter, you allowed a touchdown to two backup quarterbacks. What I want to see from the Toronto Argos here in the last week of the season is for them to end their season with back-to-back solid efforts of a football game. They don't necessarily have to win, but I want to see this team and most of its starters playing. I want to see their starters playing, and I want to see this team look good for back-to-back weeks for the sake of their fan base. Like, you could say, hey, look, this season was bad, but based on the last two games of this year, I'm excited for that team to get back on this field next year. Look, this is a team that just 2 years ago won the Grey Cup. Ticats are winners of 5 games in a row, and in the last 4 games have outscored opponents, get this, 37-16. Hamilton should be the favorite to win the Grey Cup. They're coming off that 38-26 victory in Montreal last week, and that was a game where the defense absolutely clamped down in the second half. They only allowed, I think, 5 points in the entire second half to the Montreal Alouettes on the offensive side, and that game showed that next gear that the Ticats are now capable of going to and have the talent to go to. Calgary's been that team for so long. It's kind of nice to see Hamilton on the other side say, hey, we got that gear too. What I want to see from the Hamilton Ticats is absolutely positively no starters beyond like the first series of the game, if that. I mean, if their starters play any further into the game beyond the first series, to me, that's lunacy. Now, it looks like Dane Evans will not play. I'd be shocked if Brandon Banks played. This is a team that, look, you lost Sean Thomas Erlington to injury so early in the season, and there's been injuries. Obviously, Jeremiah Masoli, my God. Injuries have kind of defined this Ticats team, but then in a way, the defiance of the injuries has defined this Ticats team, but no reason to risk it in a game that means absolutely nothing. So I want to see absolutely no starters for the Ticats. And then Calgary at BC, the last game of the week. Calgary losing last week by a single point, 29-28 in Winnipeg to the Blue Bombers, who then, of course, get to go into their bye this week. They got absolutely blanked in the fourth quarter on the offensive side, did the Stampeders, despite the fact that Bo Levi Mitchell had arguably his best game of the season. 350 yards passing, 4 passing touchdowns, and no picks. What I want to see from the Stamps in this game, it will kind of, I guess, depend on what happens in the Roughriders game, which happens early in the afternoon. And since they're in BC, I think this game doesn't start until 10 p.m. Eastern, something like that. But let's assume Calgary still has a shot at this point. I want to see them get out to a sizable early lead, let's say 14 points or more. And at that point, I'd like to see them start resting some of their starters. And I think even if Calgary's not in it, I think their starters will still play the first half, because knowing that they have this great comfort in knowing they can, even if they lost a guy like Bo Levi Mitchell, the fact that Nick Arbuckle is behind him and you know that he has played serviceably over this season, I think you'll see the starters play at least the first half in this game, one way or the other. And then the BC Lions, losers of 2 straight games after the Mike Riley injury. They lost in week 19, so not last week. They're coming off their bye. 27-19 loss against Saskatchewan. That game was in BC. Brian Burnham's a superstar. Well, I mean, what else can you say? A legit bona fide superstar in this league, but he can't beat good to great teams on his own. But that leads directly into what I want to see from the BC Lions this week. I want to see Brian Burnham targeted in the pass game 20 or more times. That's what I want to see. Not only because it showcases like the true legitimate superstar that you have on this team, because make no mistake about it, Brian Burnham's your superstar. And not only that, he only trails Brandon Banks by like 150 receiving yards. Given that Brandon Banks is probably not going to play for Hamilton, Brian Burnham could catch him realistically for the most receiving yards in the CFL this season. And I want to see that happen. That would be a lone bright spot for a BC team that damn near made that run at the end of the season to maybe even sneak in to the playoffs past the Edmonton Eskimos. So here it is, week 21 picks. And my general rule of thumb when picking the games for this week, like momentum matters for these playoff teams. So wins and losses, even at this point in the season, even if you're locked in, it's not that they have absolutely no matter whatsoever, but obviously what's more important is being as healthy and as prepared for that playoff matchup, whatever your first playoff matchup happens to be. It's being as prepared as humanly possible for that game. This game ultimately does not matter. The next game is the one that matters. So obviously you want to keep some momentum, but if you have to sacrifice end of regular season momentum for playoff health, that's a sacrifice most of these teams I think are going to make. Montreal at Ottawa, I'm actually going to take the Red Blacks to win that game. I think they go out and say, like, look, this season obviously was terrible, but the team across from us has nothing left to play for. Starters are going to be either not playing at all or rotating out fairly quickly. Let's pick up this victory. So I'm actually going to go with it. I'm going to take the Red Blacks at home to beat Montreal. On the line, the Red Blacks are 9.5-point dogs at home. And given that most, I think, Montreal starters are not going to play, I'm very happy to take those points, even if I didn't think they were going to win. Let's take Ottawa plus the 9.5. Total in the game is set at 51 points, and I didn't bother even really establishing how I would cap these games, because who in the hell knows who's even going to be playing. It's my gut feeling that this game is going to go under that total, so I'm riding entirely on gut for my totals. We're going to go under 51 points in Ottawa, Montreal. Edmonton at Saskatchewan. The Saskatchewan Roughriders full well understand that they have their destiny in their hands, and I don't think they can afford to lose to an Edmonton Eskimos team that isn't even really trying to win, because winning doesn't really do them much of any good other than a little bit of momentum heading into Montreal next week. So we're going to take the Riders at home to beat Edmonton. But on the line, I am going to hedge because the Eskimos are 9.5-point dogs on the road. Saski has no reason to blow Edmonton out. Edmonton has every reason in this game not to get blown out. I mean, this could be like a first half blowout. Like I could see the first half Saski leading by maybe 16, 17 points, something like that. But I full well see a backdoor cover here. Edmonton playing better in the second half. So 9.5 points. It's just too many for me. I think they cover it backdoor. We're going to hedge our bets and go Eskies plus 9.5. Total in the game set at 47.5 points. And once again, this will be a sweat, but it's just kind of my gut feeling that this goes under, especially as the more skilled players kind of sit and the backups rotate in, certainly on the offensive side. Gut just says to stay under. So we're going to go under 47.5 points in Edmonton Saski. Toronto at Hamilton. I would love to sit here and say that I thought the Argos were capable of beating even Hamilton's backups. I don't think that's the case. I mean, look, you can beat Ottawa all you want, but the backup, the second string players on the best team in the league, probably not. So I'm going to take Hamilton here to win this game. I think there's just too much talent top to bottom on that roster, but I'm going to hedge my bets because Toronto's a 12-point dog on the road. That's even, I get that it's on the road, and if it was a regular season game, totally, I'd be on Hamilton minus 12 all day long. But I mean, it's the last week of the regular season. You're going to be resting a bunch of starters. No, I can't lay 12 points on backups. So we're going to go Toronto plus 12 and I guess quote unquote hedge our bets. Total in the game 53.5. Once again, I think it stays under. That Hamilton defense is really, really good. Who knows what they put up on the offensive side on either side here. So the largest total of the week, 53.5. Got to go under on that one too. And the final matchup of the week, the Calgary Stampeders in BC to take on the Lions. I'm going to take Calgary to win the game, even though Saski would have won ahead of them, meaning Calgary can't catch them to win the West Division. And Calgary's going to win that football game, but I am going to take the Lions to cover. So I'm on all the underdogs this week because the lines were crazy. 9.5 points, 9.5 points, 12 points, and the Lions are 7.5 point dogs in their own building. So I just don't see that happening. I mean, maybe it happens if Saskatchewan loses ahead of Calgary, because then Calgary's going to be going all out because they want that bye week. They want that home playoff game in 2 weeks' time. Total in the game set at 46, and this is the only one that I think goes over because I think we're going to see a ton of Brian Burnham in this game. Hopefully a couple of touchdowns for him. And 46, I just don't want to sweat it. So we're going to go over 46 points in BC Calgary. There you go, folks. Those are your picks. Week 21, final week of the CFL regular season. We'll go over them here very quickly one more time. Straight up, I've got Ottawa, Saski, Hamilton, and Calgary, the first three teams there winning at home. Against the spread, I've got all the underdogs this week. Ottawa plus 9.5 because I like them to win outright. Edmonton plus 9.5, hedging the bet. Toronto plus 12, hedging the bet. And the BC Lions plus 7.5, hedging the bet. And I've got all four games going under except for the final game of the week. We got under 51 in Montreal, Ottawa. We got under 47.5 in Edmonton, Saskatchewan. And we've got under 53.5 in Toronto, Hamilton. But we are going to go over 46 in Calgary, BC. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you so much, because this is the second season of doing CFL picks. This is our second regular season now in the books. Of course, we did them as kind of an add-on to the NFL show in a couple of seasons prior, but this is only the second season that we really dove in to the CFL. And I mean, I showed incredible progression this season, I think, from last year to this year in terms of the quality of the picks and the success rate of the picks. So I feel really good about that, and I hope you guys did too. Thank you so much for watching all season long. And hey, it ain't over yet because we got playoff games just around the corner. Enjoy week 21. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. Remember, 20% off sale going on right now on nerdtees.ca. Enjoy the final week of the regular season. And next time we see each other, we'll be predicting some playoff football. No better time to be alive.